Hello, very good morning. Welcome to Breakfast with Dan Walker and Louise Minchin.
It's 6 o'clock. These are your headlines this morning. Good morning. It's Wednesday. It's the 27th of May. Future coronavirus outbreaks in England could be controlled by introducing local lockdowns, according to the government.
The Health Secretary, Matt Hancock, said some restrictions, including the temporary closure of shops and schools, could be reintroduced in specific areas if there's a spike in the number of cases. Further details will be announced today as part of a plan to boost testing and tracing of the virus. Andy Moore reports. Nearly 40 Conservative MPs have called on the Prime Minister to sack his chief advisor Dominic Cummings after he travelled from London to County Durham during the early days of lockdown.
Boris Johnson will have to answer some difficult questions from MPs when he appears before the government's liaison committee. That's later today. Here's our political correspondent, Jonathan Blake. That's Jonathan Blake. Now, President Trump has accused Twitter of stifling free speech after the social network labelled one of his posts misleading.
Mr. Trump tweeted that plans to expand the use of postal ballots in November's election will lead to voter fraud. Twitter urged users to fact-check his comments. Our North America correspondent Peter Bowes reports. South Korea has seen its biggest spike in new coronavirus cases in 2 months as nearly 2.5 million students return to the classroom.
40 new cases of COVID-19 have been reported in the last 24 hours. We're joined now by...
Laura, thank you very much. They're clearly enjoying it anyway. The first commercial craft to take people into space is due to blast off from Cape Canaveral in Florida tonight.
The SpaceX rocket and capsule will be the first to take off from American soil since 2011. 2 NASA astronauts will be on board the mission to the International Space Station. Here's our science correspondent, Rebecca Morell. Many couples across the UK have been forced to cancel their wedding plans, but one doctor and nurse from South London were able to tie the knot this week in the hospital chapel where they both work. That was in St Thomas.
Beautiful chapel, and congratulations to both of them.
Yes. Yes, well done for adding that, Louise. I forgot that bit. It's 12 minutes past 6. Head teachers in England have told us that preparing schools to welcome more children back from next week has been the toughest challenge of their entire careers. Staff
rotas, school systems and physical changes to classrooms have all been considered to ensure pupils can return safely under social distancing guidelines. Breakfast John Maguire has been to visit a school in North Somerset.
Some significant preparations underway in various parts of England at the moment for that return, which is meant to be on Monday for many people.
Should we have a look at the front pages of the news? It's difficult to get a sense of the size of it because it looks big, but it's in the photograph you can't probably tell.
There's a little flower pot there, but you don't know whether that's
it could be actually a massive flower pot.
A giant.
If we have a quick look inside the inside pages as well. Any Harry Potter fans will be really excited to hear that J.K. Rowling is treating. It obviously didn't get the response that she was expecting.
Yeah. If you are a fan of the Potter, then
I'm a massive fan.
Professor Dolores Umbridge in
Of
Elder
course.
Staunton will be here later, along with Jimmy Carter, who plays Carson in what's it called?
Downton Abbey.
Downton Abbey is what I was looking for. It's very early. Sorry, got to get the brain going. Anyway, they are going to be here because they're hosting one of these quizzes. I think it's for Marie Curie, and they've done the questions themselves.
Yeah.
So I think there's a round on
Harry Potter.
Downton Abbey. There's a round on Harry Potter, and there's a general knowledge round as well. So
and
they'll be here to tell us
they are
about
the reason that we're talking them together because they are actually married.
Yes, that is also a vital piece of information which I decided to leave out. Got this information in The Guardian about Tate Britain. Now, obviously, there's no Turner Prize this year because it's been cancelled, like many other things. But what they're doing instead is they're going to award 10 bursaries of £10,000 to deserving artists. The judges have already been all over the country trying to find the people who they think should be on the shortlist. And what they've done is normally they reveal the winner in December, but they said we can't do it this year for obvious reasons. But what we're going to do is we're going to try and give a one-off 10 grand bursary to all these people who we feel deserve it, and hopefully that will sort of boost their chances of being better artists and great recognised artists in the future. So they're trying to get around the fact that this year, like it has been for many of us, is going to be very different to how we might have expected it to turn out.
So many changes. It's 19 minutes past 6. Now, mothers are spending more time combining work from home, childcare and housework than dads during the lockdown.
A survey by the Institute for Fiscal Studies found that women were homeschooling and looking after children for an average of 10 hours a day, 2 hours more than their male partners. Our business correspondent Sarah Corker has been taking a look.
One of the many problems being caused by the continued closure of thousands of pubs and restaurants is what to do with the thousands of tonnes of produce which ordinarily would end up on the plates of hungry customers.
Sean, I like
yeah.
a bit of lettuce, Louise. I'm partial to lettuce.
I've grown.
and sour
That's
cream
my
sandwich.
only lockdown success. I'll put it on Twitter. Is my lettuce that I've grown. My lettuces. I love them.
You're a proud lettuce grower.
I literally
I
just
grew this lettuce.
we're only about allowed about that much every day, but I really love them. Carol, it's been the most. I mix them all up, and I put them in a tray, and I was going to transplant them, but basically they've all grown in this tray, and I just take a few leaves every day and sort of make. I know, I'm really pleased. It's so silly. I've been wanting to do it for years.
I hope Sally's not growing lettuce as well. I feel like I'm missing out on this lettuce.
And let us know what your sort of, I know we work in serious times as well, but, what are your lockdown successes in the garden? Have you done something that you wouldn't, grown something you normally wouldn't?
Carol's growing everything.
Look at that. Brilliant.
You're watching Breakfast with Dan and Louise this morning. It is 6:30. Just to let you know what's coming up on the programme for you.
That's all coming up a little bit later. Right now, let's tell you about the main stories from BBC News. And many local lockdowns could be introduced in England to contain future coronavirus outbreaks. That's according to the Health Secretary, Matt Hancock.
Now, it's that time of the day, just gone 6:30. It's our regular slot where we speak to a GP.
We have our GP appointment right now. Today we're joined by Dr.
Thank you to all of you who are sending in pictures of your lockdown lettuce.
Have they done that already?
Yes, inspired by you talking about growing your own. Carol's basically started a garden centre, and during your chat with the GP, I had a little text from Sally Nugent which says,
"What's she growing?
Reach you, ask me about lettuce."
OK,
So,
Sally.
Sport to come, Sal.
And that was Ian McInnes reporting for us.
I think the drones, they've got the future of everything, aren't they?
They might be. Very
well, not
might.
everything, but a lot of stuff.
We've talked about this quite a few times over the last few weeks, haven't we?
The haircut. You can't cut your hair with a drone, can you?
Not yet.
No.
Have you resorted to a home haircut during lockdown or decided to go with the overgrown look, like me, until you can book an appointment?
I was noticing this morning while I was getting ready for this programme that I've got the whole hair grown over the ears now. It's getting very serious. Well, anyway, you'll be pleased to hear that thousands of hairdressers and barbers across the UK say they could safely reopen by mid-June. That put a smile on your face. However, government advice in England currently says the earliest it could happen is the 4th of July.
So what, another over a month?
Yeah.
Rick Kelsey has been to one salon in North London, which has spent thousands preparing to reopen.
A hot topic of debate, though, isn't it?
Very much so. Thousands of tonnes of produce is at risk of being wasted as pubs and restaurants remain closed. So Sean is at a...
Watch that. I find that quite mesmerising, the
It is, isn't it?
harvest time. 6:54 is the time. It's Wednesday morning. Now, many public toilets right across the UK remain closed during the pandemic, and without the option of using the loos in restaurants, in shops and pubs, day trippers have been forced to join long queues for toilets which are open.
The British Toilet Association says the lack of facilities is also preventing some vulnerable people from leaving their homes. Breakfast Tim Muffet has more. Do get in touch with us about that if you want to, and also thank you so much. We have been all inundated with beautiful pictures of people's produce.
Who'd have thought, Louise, that you, Carol, and Sally are part of the...
We're part of the
lettuce army.
We know what's going on, don't we, Carol? Morning to you. Wednesday, the 27th of May. Future coronavirus outbreaks in England could be controlled by introducing local lockdowns, according to the government.
Health Secretary Matt Hancock said some restrictions, including the temporary closure of shops and schools, could be reintroduced in specific areas if there's a spike in the number of cases. Well, further details will be announced today as part of a plan to boost testing and tracing of the virus. Here's Andy Moore. Well, nearly 40 Conservative MPs have called on the Prime Minister to sack his chief advisor Dominic Cummings after he travelled from London to County Durham during the early days of the lockdown.
Boris Johnson will have to answer some difficult questions from some of his most senior MPs when he actually appears before the government's liaison committee later today. Let's speak to office actually at 7:30. We'll be speaking to Robert Jenrick, Housing and Community Secretary, about lots of things, including that.
We're speaking to Lisa Nandy from the Labour Party as well in just a couple of minutes' time. But before that, Donald Trump has accused Twitter of interfering in the 2020 US election after the social media company labelled 2 posts by the president potentially misleading.
Many couples across the UK have been forced to cancel their wedding plans, but one doctor and nurse from South London were able to tie the knot.
That's a nice story for a Wednesday morning,
Isn't it? 6 minutes past 7. Removing the Prime Minister's most senior advisor from his post without further delay is the only way to restore trust in public health advice. Well, that is according to the leaders of 6 opposition parties.
In a letter to Boris Johnson, the signatories, which do not include Labour, say the issue around the actions of Dominic Cummings transcends politics. As promised, we can now speak to...
It is just come up to 7:15, actually. A test and protect programme will begin in Scotland on Thursday to try to limit the spread of corona. Well, let's continue some of that thought process, actually. That's the situation in Scotland. In Wales, the government says it's wanted its test, trace, protect scheme to be operational by the end of May, while Northern Ireland began a contact tracing programme last Wednesday.
In England, 11 areas have been chosen to pilot the test, track and trace service, haven't they?
Yeah, and we're joined now by Dr Louise Smith, who is Director of Health for Norfolk County Council, which is part of that pilot, and Colin Cox, the Public Health Director of Cumbria Council, which has started its own scheme. Morning to both. Thank you very much for joining us. So, Louise, you're going to be part of this kind of pilot system. When will it start, and what have you put in place so far?
Well,
both. Colin Cox, who's Public Health Director from Cumbria, thank you, and Dr Louise Smith, Director of Health from Norfolk County Council. Thank you both very much for your time on Breakfast. Thank you.
If you are a regular watcher of this programme, you know that throughout the sort of period of the last few months, at 7:30 we've been speaking to somebody from the government every single day. And today we've got Robert Jenrick, who's going to be here in just a few minutes' time.
And we'll talk to him about that as well as lots of other things as well. In the meantime, gosh, it's been glorious, Carol.
Thank you very much for that, Carol. So, interesting few days ahead in terms of the weather. Good morning. You're watching Breakfast with Louise and Dan.
Let's get you up to date with the latest news, just coming up to 7:30. Many local lockdowns could be introduced in England to contain future coronavirus outbreaks, according to the Health Secretary, Matt Hancock. Nearly 40 Conservative MPs have called on the Prime Minister to sack his chief advisor, Dominic Cummings, after he travelled from London to County Durham during the early days of lockdown. We're joined now from Westminster by House.
It's 7:43. It's Wednesday morning. Sally has been listening to that, and
thank you. See you in a bit. Thank you very much.
It's like my argument with the children every night.
Wash your hands.
Have you washed it? With soap.
Thousands of tons of produce is at risk of being wasted as pubs and restaurants remain closed.
Sean is out and about.
Thank you.
And that has inspired you to talk about your lettuce growing, which Carol's been involved in, Sally's been involved in.
Not in my lettuce growing, but in their own lettuce growing.
Yeah, yes. And thank you for all your pictures of lockdown lettuce.
Well, it's not just... Thank you so much for pictures of all the things you're growing in your gardens. They're kind of really cheery for some reason this morning. Thank you.
You might be eating lettuce, but what about... Other things eating,
snacks.
Yes, other snacks. Yeah, getting your children to eat something that is healthy, but also if you've got loads of kids at home, trying to stop them from eating everything, eating at house and home, I suppose.
Yeah. One mum of 4 from Northumberland was so sick of arguments about snacks that she came up with an ingenious plan of buying her very own vending machine. Her children can now earn money to buy treats by doing chores and schoolwork. Let's have a look.
Genius idea.
Should we speak to Sarah, who's joined by... Tell us who's who before we chat to you.
So this is Shannon.
Yeah.
20p for a 12. I've got to say that's a bargain.
Well, I think it's cost price, isn't it? She said.
Yeah, but that's
yeah,
still,
absolute bargain.
I want some. I'm still recovering from. I know there are other chocolates available, but 65p on a Freddo. Louise, last time I went to a service station, I'm still recovering from that.
Right, let's catch up with the glorious...
It's Wednesday, it's the 27th of May. In the last half an hour or so, the Housing Secretary has outlined plans to control spikes in coronavirus infections in England by introducing local lockdowns.
Mr Jenrick also told this programme that the government's test, track and trace strategy will be ready to be rolled out in England by next month.
Let's speak to our...
Meanwhile, in Scotland, a test, trace and isolate programme will begin tomorrow to try to limit the spread of the virus.
The first commercial craft to take people into space is due to blast off from Cape Canaveral in Florida this evening.
The SpaceX rocket and capsule will be the first to take off from American soil since 2011. 2 NASA astronauts will be on board the mission to the International Space Station. Here's our science correspondent, Rebecca Morell.
It's fascinating, that, isn't it? Lots to look forward to with regards to that tonight. Now, an antiviral drug pioneered to treat Ebola will be made available to some hospital patients with COVID-19. Health Secretary Matt Hancock says this is probably the biggest step forward in the treatment of coronavirus since the crisis began. It's the drugs out there on the horizon that could have an impact as well.
who had an extraordinary amount of antibodies, and his blood was plasma was being used. So we have talked about that. Can you also tell me? I'm going to bring it down now. Just looking ahead, and we are beginning to see, things beginning to be eased. We know things changed, for example, in England on the 1st of June. Quite considerably in some ways. Then on the 15th as well, and going forward in other areas. How concerned are you that we need to kind of stick by guidelines, and that there could be, for example, a second spike or studio one day, perhaps again?
Those were the old days, Louise. Very different times.
Thank you very much. Head teachers in England have told us that preparing schools to welcome more children back from next week has been the toughest challenge of their careers.
Staff rotas, school systems, physical changes to the classrooms have all been considered to try and ensure that pupils can return safely under social distancing guidelines. John Maguire has been to visit one school in North Somerset.
Of things being put in place. Let's speak now to head teacher of Bridge Learning Campus. Thank you very much for talking to us this morning. Thank you.
If you just switched on your telly, it's 25 minutes past 8. Now, we spoke to the Housing Secretary on this programme about an hour ago. He's told Breakfast that there will be no formal review into penalty fines given to families who travelled for childcare reasons during lockdown.
There are questions around how restrictions in England should be enforced after the Prime Minister's chief advisor, Dominic Cummings, made that 260-mile trip from London to County Durham.
Yesterday, Reverend Martin Poole raised the issue of fines with the Health Secretary Matt Hancock during the daily Downing Street press conference. Let's have a little reminder.
We've got a bit of an update for you. In the last hour, the Housing Secretary, Robert Jenrick, told us the government wouldn't be waiving fines for parents who travelled during lockdown. It is just after 8:30, but we were a little bit late with the weather because we wanted to
Sorry, Carol.
talk to him. Carol has all morning, since early on this morning, Carol, we've been talking about gardening, haven't we? I mentioned my lettuces earlier. What are you growing, Carol?
Everything.
She's very new, by the way.
Lettuce expert over here.
Thanks.
3 weeks and she knows everything.
No, it's not. It's been 10 weeks. That's why they're looking like they are. Anyway, I just put loads of seeds in, Carol, but I'm in no way an expert. There are lots.
That sounds
watching
good.
BBC Breakfast.
Thanks, Carol.
Thank you. Enjoy
you
the
later.
lettuce when you eat it. So, something completely different. Many public toilets across the UK remain closed during the pandemic, and without the option of using the loos in restaurants, shops and pubs, day trippers have been forced to join long queues for toilets which are open.
The British Toilet Association says the lack of facilities is also preventing some vulnerable people from leaving their homes. Tim Muffet has been investigating.
So let's talk about some of that now. We're joined now by Tony Kelly, who lives with Crohn's disease, and also Raymond Martin from the British Toilet Association. Morning, both. Thank you so much for joining us. Tony, this must be really tough times for you. Tell us how it's affecting you.